Have you ever wondered what people would do if they thought no one was watching? If they believed you had nothing to offer them? What if I told you that one man's experiment revealed the darkest and brightest parts of humanity all at once? This is the story of Alexander Reed, a billionaire who had everything money could buy. But he lacked something he couldn't purchase, so he did something radical. He gave up his wealth, at least on paper, and lived as a homeless man for 30 days. What he witnessed during those 30 days didn't just change his perspective. It changed his entire life. Before we dive into this incredible journey, I need to ask you something. If you believe that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in character, please hit that like button right now. It helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. And if you're new here, subscribe to our channel. We share powerful stories about life, truth, and human nature every single week. Now, let me take you back to the day Alexander Reed decided to disappear from his own life. Alexander Reed was 52 years old. By any measure, he was a success story. He had built a technology empire from nothing. 3 companies sold for billions. A penthouse overlooking Central Park. A fleet of luxury cars. He could buy anything he wanted, anytime he wanted. But Alexander was lonely. His wife had left him 5 years ago. She said he was married to his work, not to her. His 2 adult children barely spoke to him. They saw him as an ATM machine, not a father. His friends, well, he wasn't sure if they were friends or just people who enjoyed his generosity. One evening, Alexander sat alone in his penthouse, looking out at the city lights. He had just closed another deal worth hundreds of millions. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt empty. That's when he remembered something his grandfather used to tell him. Alexander, the day you stop knowing what it's like to struggle is the day you lose your humanity. His grandfather had been a poor immigrant who worked 3 jobs to put food on the table. Alexander had worked hard too, but he had forgotten. Forgotten what it felt like to worry about rent. Forgotten what it felt like to be invisible. The next morning, Alexander called his most trusted assistant. He gave her instructions that sounded insane. For 30 days, he was going to disappear. No phones, no credit cards, no safety net. He would live on the streets with just $50 and the clothes on his back. His assistant thought he was having a mental breakdown. She tried to talk him out of it. But Alexander was determined. He needed to know who he really was. He needed to know if people would help him if he had nothing to offer them. He withdrew $50 in cash. He put on old, worn clothes from his charity donation pile. He took off his expensive watch, his wedding ring, everything that identified him as wealthy. And then, Alexander Reed walked out of his building and vanished into the city. The first night was the hardest. Alexander stood on a busy street corner in Manhattan. People rushed past him, heads down, phones in hand. He held a small sign that read, "Hungry. Anything helps." In 3 hours, not a single person stopped. Dozens of people walked by. Some glanced at him with pity. Most ignored him completely. A few crossed the street to avoid him. Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in decades. He felt invisible. That night, he found a spot in a shelter. The line was already 2 blocks long. He waited 4 hours to get a bed. The shelter was crowded, noisy, and smelled of despair. Men slept on cots inches apart. Some cried in their sleep. Others stared at the ceiling, lost in thoughts Alexander couldn't imagine. He lay there, listening to the stories around him. A veteran who couldn't find work. A father who lost his job and then his family. A young woman fleeing an abusive relationship. These weren't lazy people. These were people who had fallen through the cracks. The next morning, Alexander woke up with $43 left. He bought a cheap breakfast and a cup of coffee. That left him with $38. He needed to make it last 29 more days. By the end of the first week, Alexander had learned several harsh truths. People treated him differently when he looked poor. Store owners watched him like a thief. Security guards followed him. People moved away from him on the subway. He had become dangerous simply by appearing to have nothing. But he also saw kindness. A young woman gave him a sandwich without being asked. An old man shared his cigarettes and his stories. A shelter worker remembered his name and asked how he was doing. Small acts, but they meant everything. Alexander started to understand something profound. When you have nothing, you notice everything. You notice who looks at you with disgust and who looks at you with compassion. You notice who sees a human being and who sees a problem to avoid. But the real shock was still coming. Before I reveal what Alexander discovered that changed everything, I want to ask you to do something important. If this story is resonating with you, if you're feeling that pull in your heart, please subscribe to our channel right now. We're building a community of people who believe in second chances, in human dignity, and in the power of truth. Click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. It's free, and it helps us continue sharing these powerful messages. Now, let's continue with what happened next. Week 2 brought the first real shock. Alexander was sitting in a park when he overheard a conversation between 2 businessmen in expensive suits. They were talking about a new development project. A luxury condominium complex that would replace a homeless shelter. One of the men laughed. He said, "Good riddance. Those people are bad for property values. Let them go somewhere else. Alexander felt sick. These men were deciding the fate of real human beings. People with names. People with stories. People just like the ones he had met in the shelter. And to these men, they were nothing more than an inconvenience. But the real shock came in week 3. Alexander had befriended a man named Marcus. Marcus was a veteran who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He had come home with injuries, both visible and invisible. The VA system had failed him. He couldn't hold a steady job. He had lost his apartment and ended up on the streets. Marcus was proud. He didn't like asking for help. But he and Alexander had formed a bond. They shared food. They watched out for each other. Alexander learned that Marcus had a daughter, a 10-year-old girl named Sophia, who lived with her grandmother in another state. Marcus showed Alexander a picture of Sophia. His face lit up when he talked about her. He said, "She doesn't know I'm like this. I tell her I'm working construction. I send her what I can. I don't want her to be ashamed of me." Alexander asked Marcus why he didn't just tell his daughter the truth. Marcus looked at him with tears in his eyes. He said, "Because she's still a kid. She should believe her dad is strong. Not that he's broken." That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. He thought about his own children. When was the last time he had really talked to them? When was the last time he had put their needs before his work? He realized he had been absent even when he was present. He had provided for them financially but abandoned them emotionally. But the biggest shock was still to come. In week 4, Alexander witnessed something that shattered everything he thought he knew about human nature. He was standing outside a coffee shop when a young woman dropped her wallet. She didn't notice. She kept walking. Alexander picked it up and called out to her. She turned around, relieved. But then something unexpected happened. A man in a business suit rushed over. He grabbed the wallet from Alexander's hand. He looked at Alexander with disgust. He said, "Give me that. I'll make sure she gets it. People like you shouldn't be handling other people's property." Alexander stood there, stunned. The man in the suit was accusing him of theft when he was trying to help. The young woman looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. She just took the wallet from the businessman and walked away without a word. No thank you. No acknowledgement. Nothing. Alexander felt something break inside him. Not because he expected a reward, but because he realized that this woman had immediately assumed the worst of him based on his appearance. She believed the well-dressed man over the homeless man without even thinking about it. That was the moment Alexander understood the full weight of what he had been experiencing. It wasn't just about being ignored. It was about being presumed guilty, being presumed dangerous, being presumed worthless. On the 29th day, Alexander sat with Marcus one last time. He had made a decision. He told Marcus, "I have to go, but I'm going to come back. And I'm going to help. Not just you, but everyone here." Marcus smiled sadly. He said, "That's what they all say, brother. Good luck out there." Alexander didn't blame him for not believing. Words were cheap. Actions were what mattered. The next morning, Alexander walked into a bank. He withdrew money from his accounts. He went to a store and bought new clothes. He shaved his beard. He cut his hair. And then he made a series of phone calls. Within 48 hours, Alexander had set up a foundation. Not a charity that handed out food and sent people on their way. A real organization that would provide job training, mental health services, addiction treatment, and transitional housing. Real help. Dignified help. He hired Marcus as the first peer counselor. Marcus was skeptical at first. But when Alexander showed up with official paperwork and a real salary, Marcus finally believed. Alexander also reached out to his children. He didn't make excuses. He didn't blame his work. He simply said, "I was wrong. I was absent. I want to do better. Not because I'm your father and it's my obligation, but because I love you and I've been a fool." His children were cautious, but they agreed to meet him for coffee. That coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into regular visits. Slowly, painfully, they began to rebuild. 6 months later, Alexander stood at the opening of the Reed Center. It wasn't a palace. It was a warm, welcoming space where people could come for help without shame. Marcus cut the ribbon. And for the first time in years, Alexander felt proud. Not of his wealth, but of his purpose. Alexander Reed learned something in those 30 days that no business school could have taught him. He learned that wealth doesn't insulate you from loneliness. That success doesn't guarantee respect. That the way we treat people who can do nothing for us reveals who we really are. He also learned that most people aren't bad. They're just distracted. They're busy. They're worried about their own problems. But when you force them to see, when you make the invisible visible, most people choose kindness. The question Alexander asks himself every day now is simple. Who would I be if no one knew my name? If I had nothing to offer but my humanity? And that's the question I want to leave you with today. Because you don't need to be a billionaire to make a difference. You don't need millions of dollars to change someone's life. You just need to see them, to acknowledge them, to treat them with dignity. The next time you pass someone on the street who looks like they're struggling, what will you do? Will you look away, or will you see them? I want to hear from you. In the comments below, tell me, what would you do if you were in Alexander's shoes? Would you have the courage to do what he did? And if this story moved you, if it made you think, please share it. Share it with your friends. Share it on social media. You never know who needs to hear this message today. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in second chances. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that matter. And hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Remember, true wealth isn't what you have. It's what you give. It's how you treat people. It's the legacy of kindness you leave behind. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And I'll see you in the next story.